You told me that you are center left to left on the political scale. Are you active in the Democrat Party? Are you a precinct committeeman for the Democrats? Or are you involved anyway with your local party? Or are you just more of an activist?
Right now, I'm not really anything. I just started getting involved with this streaming stuff maybe a month and a half ago.
Okay.
And I want to, with the election, I might volunteer if I can find any candidates that are actually worth volunteering for.
Okay. So, I guess since this is our first time talking, I just kind of want to ask a few questions to kind of see where we're both at. Are you? I assume did you vote for Joe Biden in 2020?
Yeah, Biden in 2020 and Gary Johnson actually in 2016.
Oh, okay. Well, there we have something in common. I voted for Gary Johnson in 2016 too, so that's cool. Are you a Robert Kennedy fan going into 2024 or not so much?
I've not seen too much from him. I believe he's skeptical of the vaccines. That's what I've seen and heard.
Yeah, he's skeptical, not just of the COVID vaccine, but I think all vaccines in general. I think he's skeptical of. I don't think I don't want to put words in his mouth. I don't think he's as I don't think he goes out and says the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine will cause autism or anything like that. But I think he's opposed to most childhood vaccines as well.
Yeah, I don't know his full position on it. Honestly, I haven't looked into him too much because I don't view him as having a chance. I mean, we have an incumbent president. He's polling. I think Kennedy was polling 20% or something like that at the highest.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really see him having a shot. I mean, it could be wrong. Who knows? Weird things have happened.
Yeah, right. So I assume, are you going to be supporting Biden then and going into 2024?
Yeah, I don't know if he wins the nomination, I'm probably going to campaign for him. I view Trump as a threat to the democratic order.
Okay, and I guess if you had to tell me in maybe a couple paragraphs, why would you say Trump is a threat to liberal democracy?
Yeah, I'd say that he refused to leave office after he lost the election. He then proceeded to spread a lot of misinformation about how he actually won the election, and I don't view that as someone who should ever probably win or be voted for in a democratic society.
So it has to do with the events after the election, not so much with his policy, or does his policy threaten America too, in your view?
I mean, I might disagree on some things about policy. I mean, it's difficult for me to understand what Trump is. It doesn't seem he has much in the way of policy.
Yeah. So just so you know where I'm coming from too, I voted for Trump in 2020. Like I said, I voted for Gary Johnson in 2016. I think that Trump is a lot closer to being a Democrat than the Democrat Party would like to admit. Particularly with his stance on abortion and gay marriage and other social issues, right? And he continued so a lot of conservatives, and I yell at my fellow conservatives for this. A lot of my fellow conservatives like to tout his foreign policy positions, especially they like to say, well, Trump didn't start any new wars. Well, okay, sure, that's kind of true. He didn't invade Syria or anything like that, but he did continue Obama's bombing plan in Pakistan, Libya, Syria, and Afghanistan. So the first year or two of his presidency, I think his foreign policy was essentially identical to Obama's, and it wasn't until the latter half of his presidency where he became more of an isolationist. So I think that his policy, basically, I'm trying to say, I think his policy has been a little bit wish-washy over the years, and has changed during his presidency, even, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I would agree with that. I think that a lot of Trump's... Oh, hang on. I got feedback coming in through Kick. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I think a lot of Trump's policy or his policy inclinations towards foreign policy are actually pretty disastrous for America and disastrous for, I guess, the liberal democratic order and the rules-based international order, broadly speaking. Like I think his impulse is to generally be very skeptical of things like NATO and America's alliances and America's role in the world, which I think is disastrous and has potentially disastrous consequences for the human race.
What you mentioned America's role in the world. What would you say America's role on the world stage is?
It's a difficult question to answer, but I think broadly speaking, America's role in the world should be that we are a power that, along with an international coalition, more or less maintains peace and stability around the world to the greatest extent that we can, while protecting our own internal interests, America's own interests, and also to some extent promoting our values. It doesn't mean invading other countries like Iraq and trying to turn them into democracies, but it means that when a democratic society is under attack, like in Ukraine or Taiwan potentially, that we should, to some extent at least, come to their aid and be very vocal in our critiques as a nation of Russia or China or other imperialist actions.
Okay, so you mentioned kind of you mentioned a lot there, and you mentioned if I'm paraphrasing this wrong, let me know. But it sounds like you're against the war in Iraq, but you kind of still want America to act as the world's police. Is that accurate or no? Am I totally off base there?
I mean, I guess you could say that to some extent. I mean, if you want to call it world police, you can. I think that the United States is the only superpower right now, or well, maybe the United States and China. I think China's increasingly a threat and potentially a competitor with the United States, if not already one. But yeah, I think that we have like some degree of obligation as the largest, most powerful country to try and like maintain the global peace. Yes.
So the blue collar worker who's out there working $25 an hour job or $20 an hour job or whatever, they're going to ask like, well, why should we care about democracy in a country like Ukraine? Why should we be the world's police and intervene there? Especially considering like, you do a Google search of Ukraine and you set the search parameter to no results prior to 2 years or after 2 years ago, and every single article you see is from CNN and Bloomberg and Politico is how Ukraine is infested with fascists at all levels of government, up into including Zelensky. And so, with the narrative that they're a democracy, the average person like myself, we see that and we question, well, wait, the media was just telling us 2 years ago that Ukraine is a fascist nation. And so now we're supposed to believe that somehow after Russia invaded them that they're not? How would you respond to that?
Well, I don't think that the mainstream media characterized Ukraine as a fascist country. I mean, I think that like many countries, they have nationalists within them, and they have some pretty hardcore nationalists. But these nationalists, by and large, don't gain very many seats in parliament. I think that there's like one Svoboda member, the far right party, one of the far right parties there, that gained a seat. Not even the last election, but the one before that. So it's a relatively small percentage of the population.
Have you done a Google search and set the parameter to no results after like January 1st of 2021?
I've not specifically done that, but I mean, I'm familiar roughly with Ukraine. And yeah, I mean, there obviously every country is going to have some degree of people in it who are nationalists. But if you look at all the international organizations that monitor democracy and democratic developments, Ukraine has been, over the course of the past decade, democratizing and working towards improving corruption. Actually, if you look at like Freedom House, the Democracy Index, these NGOs, and read their reports on Ukraine, Ukraine's not a perfect country by any stretch. They have struggles with corruption, for instance. Yeah, but they also have free and fair elections. They have a society that broadly respects the rule of law and guarantees its citizens certain rights. And so, why should the factory worker care if Ukraine gets invaded? Well, I think that they should care because it benefits them too if they live in a safer, more democratic, freer world.
So there's 49 major wars going around in the world right now. There's a lot of news coming out of Myanmar and Burma, or it used to be called Burma. All over Africa, Southeast Asia, even within Europe, and there's multiple democratic countries that are facing escalating hostility and wars, some with more deaths than in Ukraine over the last 10 years. And yet, for some reason, it seems like the United States is only focused on assisting in Ukraine. And you had just mentioned that you thought the United States is the only superpower in the world, with possibly the exception of China. And so, I won't discuss whether or not I think the war is justified from the Ukrainians' perspective. I don't know. I don't have an opinion on that. But for the average American taxpayer, it seems like a little bit. It seems like an unnecessary burden to place upon them for a country that's not even the only democratic country in the world that's going through an invasion or a civil war or a revolutionary war or anything like that. If we're gonna use protecting democracy as the standard, then by necessity we need to be involved in probably at least 25 conflicts worldwide at the moment. What would you say to that?
Well, I don't think that there are 25 democratic countries that are currently under threat. I mean, a lot of these countries that you mentioned, like Burma, you're talking about like internal civil conflicts, and you're not talking about countries that have established democracies. Like Burma was a country that had something of a democratic experiment before the military coup them. Same with like Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, or Sudan. But these countries were not stable democracies, and the United States has played a role in trying to both condemn these countries and place sanctions on them where necessary in some cases. But our obligations are not unlimited. We have the strategic interest just isn't there as much with, say, Mali or Burkina Faso or Burma.
I don't think that you could argue that there's a strategic interest in Ukraine aside from.
Really?
No, I don't think so. You had just mentioned that United States is the only superpower, and everything that I've been hearing from people in the mainstream media and people like Adam Kinzinger is that Russia is a despot nation now. So I don't think that their invasion of Ukraine has any sort of strategic impact upon the United States. It doesn't affect our my personal safety is not affected day to day with what's going on in Ukraine. And like you said, Russia's not a superpower anymore, and so what they're doing in Eastern Europe, I don't think it bears any weight upon our safety here in the United States. I think if anything, it's weakening our resources. I mean, we're already in an ammo shortage. As China strengthens, we need to be conserving all of our resources for a potential future conflict with China.
Well, I think that our support for Ukraine currently is very much related to China. I think that we are very much setting a precedent that you can't just invade your neighbor and take them over because you want to take their territory. And Russia's losing very badly in Ukraine. And now, who knows how the war is going to turn out in the end, but it seems that very much with U.S. support that Ukraine is able to defeat the Russians, or at least hold them at bay significantly, which should prove as a deterrent to China. And we're able to do this while costing ourselves virtually nothing, right? Most of the aid that we send them, not all of it, but most of it, is sending them old equipment that we're going to be phasing out anyway.
We sent them. We're right now we're on a shortage of 5.56 because we've been sending them so much 5.56. Like our military. I think Milley was it. I can't even remember who was testified before it, but our NATO ammunition is like a 2 million round shortage or something like that at the moment.
Yeah, and if there's specific areas where we need to cut back the aid, then yeah, sure, I'm open to that for definitely. But as a general matter, we're defeating the Russian military, providing a deterrent to China, and we're protecting democracy. We're like winning on like 3 major fronts that the United States cares about, while guaranteeing the security of Europe. And we're doing it for almost nothing.
What does the security of Europe have to do with my day-to-day life?
Well, we live in the most peaceful, prosperous time to be alive in all of human history, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that we are all trading with each other, that we live in a society where increasingly a global order that is largely favors democracy and largely favors countries cooperating with each other over invading each other and going to war. And that this is beneficial to everyone and to the future of the human race as a whole.
Interesting. And so where would you say support? What would you say should be the limiting factor on our support? Because we obviously, should we send U.S. troops over there? I mean, I think we already have U.S. Army Special Forces operating over there. But should we send?
I don't think there's not evidence of that, right? There's
well, there was that I guess that Discord leak where the kid was arrested, but I don't know if you want to believe that information.
Right, and that was something that's like we had 100 troops there, and Britain had something like 50. Like,
yeah, I think they said there were like maybe 10 special operation detachment alphas there conducting foreign internal defense or something like that. I don't know what. I just heard from the news what he was releasing. I didn't actually read.
Yeah, I don't know. We might have some training forces there, training people behind the enemy lines, but I don't think we're definitely not engaging Russia directly.
So do you think that U.S. troops should directly engage Russia?
No, I think that the more or less the current strategy boosted. I think one area where I would criticize Joe Biden is that I don't think he's doing necessarily enough to ensure a Ukrainian victory. But I would not support troops on the ground, not a no-fly zone, no direct confrontation with Russia. That's massively escalatory. The current approach where we send them some aid and then we have debates internally and with our allies about what other types of aid we can or should send, I think is probably the best approach, because we don't want to escalate the conflict unnecessarily. We don't want to put American lives in danger.
So if you had to put a dollar amount on it, how much more aid do you think that we should be giving Ukraine until we say, you know what, enough is enough?
I don't think there's a dollar amount. I think that it's until we win the war. Unless the conditions on the battlefield drastically change to the point where it looks like victory becomes impossible, and is not worth pursuing because the cost becomes like so drastically high and there's no point in winning. But I don't think we should put a dollar amount, and I don't think we should telegraph that to Russia either. Like, oh, we'll only spend 400 billion. After that point, we're on your own. So if Russia could just last out until we hit that point, then they'll win the war.
And so you had mentioned, and this ties into what you were just talking about. So you had mentioned that Ukraine is defeating Russia pretty substantially. When you look at the map of the territory that was Russian controlled in like February of 2022 versus like last month of 2023, you can see that their territory is pretty much unchanging, with the exception of the northern Ukrainian border. And so it looks like the war is at a standstill to me. If I'm looking from the map in June of 2023 compared to the map of November of 2022 compared to the map of March of 2022, it doesn't look like Ukraine is advancing at all. And it looks like Russia is just holding the territory that they've already taken and not trying to push forward at all. And so if we're going to continue to send support over there, should we not set expectations for the Ukrainian army on what they must succeed in order to continue to receive support?
Yeah. No, I think that we probably should set expectations. And Ukraine just very recently, a month and a half ago, it began their counteroffensive. So we're going to see how that's going to play out. And that will the success of this will probably determine the amount of aid that they're going to be receiving moving forward from the United States and from other allies. And if it looks like they're not going to be able to recapture any of their territory, which I'm looking at a map right now, it looks like.
Are you looking at the one from BBC, or which map are you looking at?
This one's from Wikipedia, February 24 February 2022 to present. I can link it
Okay.
quick.
I'll link the map from. I was looking at the maps from the British broadcast. There's another site too that I think they show daily or monthly maps maybe.
Yeah, I see the map that you sent over. That only shows the southern part of the country, the Donbass.
If you load the article into the Google search engine, they pull up the complete picture file from the website,
Okay.
and it shows the entire country. It's from the Institutes of the Study of War.
Yeah, this looks like the current control of the map. Yeah, but if you look at during the initial invasion, I'm screen sharing it here.
Let me take a look.
The one from Wikipedia. The blue areas are areas that have been recaptured, so they represent the full extent of the Russian occupation. And then the red areas are still under Russian control.
Where are you sharing your screen? I can't see it.
Oh, sorry, on YouTube.
On YouTube? Okay.
See if
Link
I
me
can do it
your.
on-
I don't even know your YouTube channel. Oh, I can probably find it. Give me a second. Tachyon Blue. Let me pull it up here.
Oh, wait, hang on. JT says he's having trouble hearing you. I'm going to go ahead and...
Oh, it's okay.
Okay, turn up desktop capture. Can you hear him now?
Let me know if you can hear me, JT.
Yeah, you were coming through like really quiet before. I'm so sorry. I adjusted in OBS. It should be better now.
Oh, that's funny.
For some reason, the audio's not coming in. Okay.
I'm seeing the indictment right now. I don't know if you want to pull up the.
We'll talk about that later, but
Oh, cool.
yeah. So here's the.
Yeah, if you want to pull up the map, that would be sweet.
All right, there's like a 30-second delay between YouTube and.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah,
that's
I'll take
funny.
a look at it.
For some reason, the audio's not coming in. Okay.
Oh, now
he can hear
I'm
me. I
seeing
think we're
the indictment. How's it going, JT?
All right. Thanks, JT, for letting us know. All right. Can you see on the screen share now?
It's still on the delay, but let me fast forward it a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so yeah, that's the same. That's basically the same map that the Institutes of War was showing. The blue area is what they've recaptured, and the red area is essentially where they've been fighting for the last year and 3 months. I think is that accurate?
More or less. Yeah, the map's not changed significantly in the past year and a half. But
so here's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, and then I'll.
They have just launched their counteroffensive, right? There was very much about a year where there was absolutely nothing happening in the war. Some minor fighting around Bakhmut, but the conflict had largely stalled out.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And I mean, I've only been seeing anecdotal stories of how the counter offensive is going, and I don't think, to be honest, I don't think anyone can really say if it's going well or not, because I'm seeing reports on Twitter from pro-Russian people that are saying they're destroying the Ukrainians, and I'm seeing the same thing from Ukrainians, and the fog of war kind of distorts the truth. So who knows what's actually occurring there.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just we probably won't have a clear picture for at least a few months.
My concern, and this is actually where maybe Democrats a couple decades ago would agree with me, is I'm very opposed to interventionism as a matter of foreign policy. I don't think so. I supported the Iraq War in the 2000s, and I think I should have. I shouldn't have. And I think the Democrats were correct. The saying back then was the United States is not the world's police. Why are we over there? And I think that sentiment is true throughout the rest of our foreign policy, goals. I don't think the United States should be involved in Ukraine, because I don't think it's our war to be involved in. And then when I see like a map like this, where the entire south of Ukraine has essentially remained under Russian control for the last year and a half, despite the Ukrainian, I'll use the word propaganda. If you don't like that term, that's, fine. What I've been hearing from them is that, oh, we're destroying the Russians. But when you look at the actual map of the territory that's controlled, it really hasn't changed in one direction or the other for the last year and a half. So it looks to me like a stalemate. And we've provided billions of dollars of aid, and they haven't even been able to take back their country, in a matter of, a year and a half or 2 years. And so my sympathy for providing them more support kind of washes away at that point, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it does. Though I think that if you looked at a map of the battlefields of almost any war, these things don't just there's not like a constant push and pull. There's preparing the logistics and trying to get forces in place, which they're receiving massive amounts of aid from the United States and also from Europe and from other countries around the world as well to a lesser extent. Trying to get all of the forces in place to try and mount an offensive. It's not like they're constantly fighting over pieces of territory. There's going to be skirmishes across the border and in various contested regions. But by and large, these things happen through major military operations, right? It's not just like, okay, well, the war's been going for a year, and they've only taken back the north, they've not taken back the south yet, and maybe they won't. It's, okay, we're building the forces necessary to take back the south, and that's going to be a whole separate offensive that we're going to launch, ideally simultaneously. Again, we don't know that much about the exact deployments of Ukraine or Russia, so we don't know how that's necessarily going yet. But it's not going to be like a constant, like the map's changing every few days, right? Or even few weeks. It's going to be, here's a major offensive. We're going to see how that offensive plays out, and maybe it's going to succeed or maybe it's not.
Oh, right. No, and I understand that, but we just got out of 2 20-year wars, just recently, and we just spent 20 years in Iraq and 20 years in Afghanistan, and every year that goes by with this Ukraine conflict, that's another year that we're involved in a foreign conflict. And we're 2 years into providing them billions of dollars. I don't know. It might be close to 500 billion now total, or even more.
Equipment, though, right? That most of that's not money.
Right. No, but someone had to pay for that equipment.
Yeah, but that equipment was going to either be used or be discarded eventually, or go into storage.
Well, we've been giving them Abrams, and we're talking about giving them F-16s now. Abrams, have another 20 years on them that we could be using for ourselves. Sure, if we want to give them some, surplus M16s, which, are not in service anymore, fine, but that's not what we're doing. We're providing them with, armored vehicles, Abrams tanks, all sorts of. Joe Biden himself, he said we would never provide them with Abrams tanks because that would be tantamount to declaring war on Russia, and yet then we did that, So yeah, I don't think it's just surplus. I don't think it's just surplus logistics we're giving them. We're giving them, highly valued military equipment that still is in use today.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not just surplus. It's also providing them with not top of the line. We're not giving them like F-35s or anything, but we are providing them with relatively recent military hardware. But isn't that, if you disagree with us supporting Ukraine, I get that, but if the objective is for us to win the war, or for Ukraine to win the war rather, then shouldn't we be providing them with as much support as they could need and use practically on the battlefield?
So I think that the presupposition there is where I would disagree with you. I don't think that we should be supporting Ukraine winning the war. I think that we should be neutral in regards to Ukraine and Russia. I keep telling everyone, on Twitter, you post something that's anti-Ukraine and all the NAFO folks come out and start attacking you. And I'm like, no, you misunderstand. I think that Vladimir Putin is evil, and I think Zelensky is evil, and I think that they need to share a prison cell together for the rest of their lives, because I think both sides are committing war crimes. I think they're both war criminals. So I don't think the U.S. should have the presupposition that we want Ukraine to win the war. I think that we should have the belief that whichever outcome happens is what happens, and we're going to stay out of it. We're going to have strategic neutrality.
Well, why do you think that Zelensky is a war criminal when his country's being invaded and he's just defending his country?
I can send you some of the videos that I found. So there's videos of Ukrainians, stripping people and tying them naked to street lamps. There's videos of the Ukrainian military forcing individuals with Down syndrome into the conscription. All sorts of stuff that I would say is a war crime. And so I hold the leader of that army accountable for those sorts of activities.
I mean, it sounds like you've got some videos that, look, I don't know if they're real or not, but even like what? You have like a video of someone with Down syndrome being conscripted into the armed forces. Like, how is this? Like, what? I mean, what is this going to prove exactly?
Well, I think that using disabled people as meat shields is not a good thing in war. I think that even violates the Geneva Conventions, if I'm not incorrect. Does it not?
I mean, I don't know specifically if that does. I mean, it wouldn't be surprised if there might be some sort of international rule against that. I don't think that the general policy of the Ukrainian armed forces is to take people with Down syndrome and put them in the military.
So from the here, I'll send you the video. I got it saved here somewhere. And it's in Ukrainian, so you have to translate it. But let me pull it up here. And then there's anecdotal stories from both sides of both Russia and Ukrainian armed forces doing some pretty despicable sexual acts against one another. And I tend to believe both sides of the story on that. And so I would say, and then the other thing is, a leader that's unwilling to sue for peace, even if it means losing some territory when a conflict is at a standstill, I think that's a little tyrannical. But that's just a personal opinion. I can't really argue one way or the other for that. So I just sent you the link.
Should the United States have sued for peace? I'm pulling it up now. Should the United States have sued for peace after we had attacked at Pearl Harbor and just given away, Hawaii and Guam and all these territories to Japan?
So no, and that's where it gets into what I would define as just war theory. So I believe that the leaders of a nation have a responsibility when they're waging war to look at the war as objectively as possible and to determine whether or not more lives will be saved or more lives will be lost by either going to war or suing for peace. So in the case of Pearl Harbor, with the entire world at war, I think that it was just for us to go to war with Japan, because it was with the goal of preserving life, and there was a reasonable expectation that going to war would preserve life. So now, to give you a hypothetical, let's say that I live in the United States of Andy, and we're a small nation state with an army of 20,000 people, and we're invaded by Canada, and they have an army of 500,000 people. The expectation of that invasion is that my 20,000 men are probably going to get wiped out. And so surrendering in that situation is going to preserve more life. And so I would advocate that surrender in that situation is the more moral decision that should be made, because the ultimate goal of any political decision should be the preservation of life.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I don't think I would actually go with you there. I don't think that there is. I mean, there may be some circumstances where you look at the opposing force up against you, and you look at your own forces, and you see that you're completely overwhelmed, and you're like, look, let's just surrender. Let's maybe try to eke out some sort of deal here, or even just unconditionally surrender if we think that they're going to treat our POWs well, and just go with it. But if you think that you've got a shot at winning, I think you have an obligation, not an obligation, but you have the right to pursue that. If you're being aggressed against, I think that you have the right to defend yourself. And I think that applies to communities of people like nation states as well. I think that if
So,
Russia
oh yeah, go ahead.
if Russia is going to invade your country, and you think that you've got a shot at winning and taking back your territory, liberating your people who are living under Russian occupation, or you can even use an extreme example too, like if you're Poland and you see that Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union are both invading you, I don't think that you have an obligation to look like, well, we can save more lives if we just surrender right now.
So I mean, yeah, I think it gets down to pride at some point. Like, do you have pride in your nation, and is that pride more important than saving lives? I think that's probably where we would disagree. I'll quickly give you my rundown of what I think justifies a war. So like, first off, that the cause and intent must be just, and it must be to protect innocent and to save lives and preserve law and order. Then I think that there has to be a right to intervene with violence, and that that right must be declared by Congress. So the president, for instance, doesn't have the authority to give aid or send troops or send money or send equipment. Congress doesn't have the right to do that on their own. First, there must be a declaration of war from Congress. I think that a war needs to be the last resort, that all diplomatic options have to be used. Like I said before, there needs to be a reasonable expectation of success in a war. And I think that the cost of a war can't be greater than the evil that would be remedied. So, like in World War II, the cost, the evil was very extreme, like murdering, upwards of 15 million Christians, Jews, and Gypsies is a pretty big evil. So the cost to stop that can be quite high. And then I also believe that a just war needs to be a proportionate response. So, if a country sends 10 troops into your country to attack, you can't just go and start nuking their country. So those are kind of the 6 criteria that I have for a just war. Now, I'll say this. It might be that Ukraine is justified in fighting that war with Russia based on my criteria. They may have every right and be totally justified. That doesn't mean that the United States is justified in, essentially going to war with Russia, a proxy war, by my criteria either. So it may be that Ukraine is justified for defending themselves, but the United States is not justified for intervening. Well, sorry, that was kind of long-winded,
no,
but...
Well, if you want to talk morality, I mean, I'm not even opposed to some of your criteria for a just war. I'm not sure what I don't think I'd use like the legal frameworks of like the president or Congress's role if we're talking morality here. But if Ukraine is in the moral right to defend themselves, why would it be morally wrong for the United States to then support Ukraine in that case?
Because the cost to our people is great, and so I mean,
is it though?
Look at. Yeah, I think so. I think I did the math, and it cost the average American something like $8 a day to fight in Ukraine. So that's the average American is paying over $2,400 a year right now, which is a significant amount of money, particularly with inflation being at 4% right now.
Yeah, I've not run that exact number, but the United States of America is, again, a lot of this is already existing equipment that we're sending them. And 2, with fiat currencies, you're essentially able to borrow to an extremely significant degree. And I think that's actually good. It allows you to have the leeway to do major projects, including, in this case, the defense of Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, I just like
strong. Like our economy is doing pretty well. Like we've largely gotten inflation under control, and
I mean, inflation is so the problem with that is like unemployment is low, yes, but like our total workforce, our total civilian workforce is still less than it was during pre-pandemic years.
What, labor force participation?
labor force participation is at like 64 million right now. Pre-COVID, it was at 66 million. So we're
No
still,
shot. There's only 64 million people working in the United States.
yeah. Let me pull up the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. So from BLS.gov, Bureau of Labor Statistics, currently our civilian labor force participation rate is 62%. Prior to COVID-19, it was 1.1% higher, 63%.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, it's definitely Sorry, 60. Yeah, they said 65 million. I'm like, there's no way.
I sorry, I probably did say million, but so the percent, so our economy hasn't fully recovered from COVID, and the problem with having such high inflation, and keep in mind, we're not using the same CPI criteria that they used back, like in the Carter years. We changed that in 1981. The problem, we had high inflation for a year and a half, and it's still 4%, which is still 2% higher than we'd like.
Yeah.
The cost didn't come down on anything. The cost is still high. Like inflation it's going up in price slower than it did 2 months ago, but it still hasn't gone back to the price that it was, in 2020 or 2016, right? So the American people are still experiencing high costs for goods and services, even though the inflation rate is, it's still high. 4% is still high. That's
3.2 is what I'm seeing.
3.2. Let me check that. You may be correct. I think most economists say that they want it between 2 to 2.5%. I could be wrong on that.
That's about right. Though I think some of our preconceptions about what the ideal rate of inflation is are changing, because we were dropping, I think, below 2% for a while, and originally we thought there would be major trade-offs with this. And it doesn't seem like there were.
Well, and I'm not trying to exclusively blame Democrats for inflation. I think that Trump is greatly responsible for I think Trump is responsible for the elevated inflation. I think Joe Biden is responsible for keeping it that high, right? So I think they're both to blame equally.
And I think like the pandemic, but I think that actually I think Trump's response and Congress's response with the CARES Act, I think you could say that they spent too much money and some of it wasn't targeted very well. Some people were making more money than they made before on unemployment, including myself. And some people were obviously gaming the PPP system. But like, it was a major crisis. We had to spend a lot of money to do something. And especially since people were staying home, the economy was slowing down. And that was going to happen. There was going to be massive unemployment, even if we didn't have any lockdown measures. Now, maybe it would have been less without any lockdowns, but clearly the United States government had to do something. So I'm fine with Trump actually spending large swaths of money. And I think that COVID also disrupted supply chains too. And trying to blame either Trump or Biden or either party necessarily is not great.
Oh, I kind of blame the entire world government for shutting I will probably disagree on this as well. I don't think we should have shut down the world economy over COVID-19. But that's a whole nother discussion. But
yeah, one we can have if you want to. But as for the labor force participation, you're right. From my understanding, yeah, it is lower than it was pre-COVID. But I don't think that's not necessarily a problem, as long as people who want a job can get one. And I think a lot of those people aren't going to re-enter the workforce because a lot of them were people who retired early, or people who were single parents. Or not single parents. I'm sorry, they were parents, and they decided I'm going to become a stay-at-home mother or even father, and I think that that's fine too.
Yeah, that's probably true to some degree. I don't know how much, but having more people in the labor force is a good thing. Like I don't think that you can say that all people just want. I think there's a lot of people that want to work right now that aren't working, and I think it's a little dishonest for like Joe Biden to say he created 14 million new jobs when the labor force participation rate is still lower than it was under Trump. I think that's a little bit of manipulating the numbers a little bit for a particular narrative.
Well, obviously, to some extent, it is kind of silly of him to take credit for bringing back jobs that were furloughed during COVID or disappeared during COVID and came back. Yeah, sure, I'll give you that. But are you sure you want the labor participation rate to go up? Because you say more people, it's better when more people work, but isn't something that maybe you don't hold this view, but a lot of conservatives consider it good if people decide to stay home with their kids. Like if you have a stay-at-home parent.
Oh yeah, but I don't think that I think there's some people that stayed at home because of COVID. I don't think it's 1.1% of the total labor force.
I mean, that doesn't sound like it. I mean, 1.1%. I mean, I'm sure it's not all that, but 1.1%. That's 1 out of every 100 people. That doesn't strike me as too shocking.
I don't know, maybe.
Or actually, it'd probably be like 1.5 because it wouldn't be. It would be 1% of 62 or whatever. Or I guess it would be 1 out of 100. So yeah, I guess it would be 1 in 100 people roughly. 1%.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, sure. I guess it's a good thing if people are staying home. I don't particularly, I think as you saw from my stream, I'm a pretty, I'm not just like a Christian. I'm a pretty Orthodox Christian. I have pretty, reformed Christianity beliefs, so pretty Orthodox. And my interpretation of like Proverbs 31, which is I think kind of where you're going with this, is not that women have to stay out of the workforce. I think that that passage of scripture shows that the woman worked in the fields, she owned fields, she possibly even worked in a factory at some point. So I don't think that it's necessarily a 100% thing that a woman should stay home with the family and raise a family. I think that there's liberty to choose and decide that. I think obviously the family should be the number one priority for both husband and wife. But so I kind of agree with what you were saying, but I think that I need to make that caveat as well.
Okay, well, this could possibly be a good segue, unless there's anything you want to add about the Ukraine situation or the economy. We could talk about Christianity and politics.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that.
All right. Well,
what do you want to know?
Well, I guess first off, I guess you said you're conservative. You supported the Iraq War. You obviously your faith heavily influences your views, and you consider that a positive thing, right?
Correct.
So, to you, what does it mean to have like a religious society and to have a religious state? Or is that something you see as desirable or not?
I think every single society is a religious state. I think even a secular society is a religious belief system. I think that even atheism requires faith that there's no God, and so even an atheist government is religious. So I think that the question isn't whether or not we should have a religious society. I think every society is religious in one way or the other. The question is, which religious society do we want to live in?
Gotcha. And when you say religious, you don't necessarily mean like in the strict view of there being some sort of faith, but you're using that as like, so they have to have some sort of ethic to them.
Yeah, so I would tell you that every single law, every single aspect of the justice system and of our legislative system is the imposition of a morality upon a group of people. So when I make a law that says on Fridays you must go for a walk, that's a moral statement saying that walking on Fridays is a good thing. Does that make sense?
Kind of. I don't know if I'd agree that everything involving the law necessarily hinges upon morality. And you could have the government dictate things that are not based upon a moral ethic, but rather just as it's better if we all get along. For instance, like just take smoking inside. Like you could make a moral argument that about smoking and whether or not you should be allowed to smoke in restaurants or whatever, right? And or you can make arguments that are sorry, I'm not sure where exactly I wanted to go with that, but
well, here's a perfect example.
It could be the case that we don't want people to smoke inside of restaurants, so therefore we're going to impose that upon them. It's not even saying that it's immoral to smoke in a restaurant necessarily. It could just be that we just don't, as a society, want that to be the case.
Yeah, I would say that that is a moral impetus that you're putting. So the reason that you're not smoking inside of a restaurant is because secondhand smoke puts people at risk of developing cancers, and so the morality here is the value that we're placing on human life, and the law that prevents people from smoking inside of restaurants is a moral statement that we must protect the sanctity of human life. Does that make sense?
Yes, I don't know if we can. I think smoking is a bad example. I shouldn't
Okay.
pick that, but I think you could have some sort of rule in place where we don't recognize something as immoral as a society, generally speaking, but we still think that it's better that we all agree with each other. That could be seen as like a sense of morality, like valuing the collective. I guess they could view that as a sense of morality. You're valuing the collective happiness or collective prosperity of a group of people over the individual's freedom to do X, Y, or Z. So sure, I guess if you want to boil it down, everything is political and everything is moral to some extent.
Yeah, that's kind of the premise of what I believe. And so, so like I said, I think every single government um is a religious institution, essentially. I think that our government is a conglomeration of conservative values or Christian values that played a huge role in the founding of this country, as well as an amalgamation of secular values that kind of injected themselves into our politics and our policy over the course of the last 247 years.
Well, I don't think viewing it as religious necessarily is the right because I don't would you say that morality only comes from religion?
I would say that every single individual has their own particular worldview, and I would say that some people have a worldview that borrows morality from other worldviews and doesn't have an objective foundation upon which they can make a moral claim.
And by objective foundation, you mean that like God told you X, therefore X is true.
Yeah, correct. So when I let's say I make a law, we'll use an easy one. Murder is wrong, and you'll be punished for murder. I can point to the Book of Exodus and say that is the objective foundation for why I believe murder is wrong, because it says so right here in the Bible. And so whenever I make a moral claim, I have basically a source that I can point to say that is the foundation of my morality.
Yeah, and I don't think religion's the worst thing for people to base their morality on. But I also don't think there's any reason to believe that religion's true, or that the Bible or Quran, that like what is written in them is the word of God, right? It could have great wisdom in it, and there could be positive aspects that people take from that, and also negative ones from reading those books. But I don't think that God wrote the Bible or guided man to write the Bible. And I don't think that there's good reasons to think that God is watching over us necessarily to determine what is good or what is right or wrong. I think we have to kind of determine for ourselves what that is, and as a society. And I think also that part of us determining what that is us creating religions.
So here's where I see a major problem with that. So what you just described is kind of a subjective form of morality, where we're deciding as a society what's moral or not. Well, we've seen, and this is why like pure democracy is evil, because it's essentially mob rule. So one day it may be totally immoral to murder people, but then the next day, if society deems that as a collective that it's okay to murder people, then that would be moral. So that's why I like to use the phrase objective foundation as opposed to having a subjective foundation, is because my morality can't change. Interpretations of it may be different, and we may argue about whether or not this particular verse means this or this. But at the end of the day, that's still the objective foundation. Whereas with what you just described, That's a subjective worldview, and it can change day to day depending on the collective view of what society is. So I'll give you an example. Right now, the majority of society says that abortion is a good thing or is allowable. So if the collective society changed their view on that tomorrow and said, you know what, we changed our mind, abortion is wrong, then would you and the rest of the Democratic Party get behind that because that's what the subjective view of society says?
No, I think that as a society, we have to determine for ourselves and with each other, like what exactly is the best moral framework. And I think part of that involves religion being a part of that conversation, and part of it also brings in various different philosophies and other secular schools of thought, and we consider it from like a wide variety of angles, and then we have a conversation about that. And some of the outcomes from that could be negative. We could disagree, and there could be disagreements within society about what is right and what is wrong, and you should try to like bring people together into. So let's use your abortion example. Let's say that all of a sudden we decide that abortion should be legal everywhere, and that this is like a vast majority viewpoint in the United States, and we start seeing the laws change. You could still hold the view that abortion isn't immoral and try to work within that framework to change it, because you're still thinking about it for yourself, and you're still cooperating with other people to try and change that framework.
But do you see how that there's no set morality though in that system, that it's constantly in flux? What may be moral one day is not moral the next.
Yeah, but isn't that sort of how societies are supposed to evolve and change over time? Like, we once thought slavery was moral, and then we changed our mind on that. Then we thought like racism was moral, and we changed our mind on that. We thought that women not being able to vote was moral, and we changed our mind on that. We
no, but so like with slavery, the majority of America thought that slavery was moral, even including until the 13th and 14th, even including into the 19th, 20th century. It was because of Christian abolitionists that said no, this is dehumanizing and man stealing and should be punished by death, that we ended slavery. But because there was no objective foundation for morality at that time in the United States, we ended up allowing chattel slavery, which is one of the great sins of this nation.
Well, I don't view Christianity as inherently being responsible for, or being responsible for the abolition of slavery. I mean,
who were the abolitionists?
I'm sure a lot of them were Christians, because almost everybody was Christian back then.
They were almost all covenantal Presbyterians. I'll send you a list of the names later, so you can look at them.
I think Quakers. Yeah, Quakers were opposed to slavery. There were religious groups that were opposed to it, but
they were almost exclusively all adhering to like Calvinist soteriology and postmillennial eschatology. Almost every single abolitionist.
If Christianity's been around for 2,000 years, why did it take them 2,000 years or 1,800 years to abolish slavery?
Because mankind is sinful.
And then there's also slavery within the Bible as well.
So no, that's way different. So the Bible says that man stealing, slavery, is such a terrible sin that there's only one acceptable punishment for. So if I were to commit the type of slavery that we had here in the United States back in the 1800s, according to the Bible, there's only one punishment for that, and that's the death penalty. When you're referring to the translations of slavery in the Bible, that's a lot different. So that was essentially indentured servitude. So like let's say I was driving an ox cart back in ancient Israel, and I wasn't paying attention, and I ran over someone's cow and killed their cow. If I didn't have the money to pay for that cow and interest on that cow, then I would be responsible to go into indentured servitude for that person for up to 7 years, or until the price, if the price of the cow was paid off earlier. So it wasn't chattel slavery. It was more of like, I don't have the money to pay you back for what I owe you, so I'm going to work as your servant for 6 months to pay you back.
And do you think that that's the only kind of slavery that was widely practiced within Christendom?
No, I don't, and I think that there's many Christians that that were living in sin that had chattel slaves that they should have been punished by the death penalty.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the specific biblical passages. I just know that de facto Christianity didn't seem to abolish slavery.
No, there's been a lot that
for a very long time.
There's been a lot that Christians have gotten wrong, but I'll say this: the first person to abolish slavery anywhere in the world was William Wilberforce, a Calvinist with postmillennial eschatology in the United Kingdom, and then it was a bunch of Presbyterians and Quakers that got it abolished here in the United States.
And when did William? I'm sorry, what was his name?
Wilberforce.
Yeah.
Wilberforce. It's a little controversial how you want to say this. So William Wilberforce had slavery abolished in England. I believe it was in 1803. It wasn't outlawed in the entire British Empire until after the United States abolished it here. So the United States was technically the first nation to abolish it within all of its borders. Britain was the first to abolish it within their home country.
Well, is it? I mean, okay, 1803 is. I don't think that there was ever widespread slavery practiced in the UK, but
they had
Christianity that caused William Wilberforce and the society at large to abolish slavery, or do you think it was the Enlightenment or something else?
Oh, William Wilberforce directly correlated it to his faith. His mentor was the author of Amazing Grace. You've probably heard that Christian hymn. William Wilberforce, his exact quote was like, slavery is not his exact quote. I'm paraphrasing. Like, slavery is an abomination to God. Man stealing is an abomination to God. These are fellow image bearers in Christ. We need to end slavery.
Yeah, I'm just not sure why it took 1800 years.
Because mankind is sinful.
But I would think that if Christianity was this like great force towards pushing for the abolition of slavery, and just other positive things that we consider in society, I don't know why it took them so long. Whereas it seems like, under like the way I sort of view most of this happening, and I think Christianity, like religion, played a role. But I think that by and large, our societies began to think about ourselves and things differently through the Enlightenment. And that
Can you name one non-Christian nation that has abolished slavery?
I mean, like, almost all countries on Earth have abolished. I'm pretty sure every country on Earth has abolished slavery except like Mauritania. So Japan,
China still has slavery. There's still slavery in North Korea. There's still slavery all over Africa, all over Southeast Asia, all over the Middle East. There's slaves everywhere. There's more slaves today than there were in all of human history, particularly in the sex trade.
Officially condone them now, right? China has people, the Uyghurs, in concentration camps, right? The official policy of China is that slavery should be illegal, and they are obviously violating that with their own laws, right? And as for, I mean, how prevalent do you think slavery is in Japan? Let's say.
In Japan, I imagine it's quite high with the sex trade over there.
I mean, maybe there's sex slaves in the United States too.
Yeah, no, it's awful here. Like, we need to end that.
Yeah, I mean, like, but it's illegal, right? We recognize it as morally wrong. Our law enforcement agencies like try to make some effort to stop it when possible.
Here's this is from the Washington Post here. That's countries that still have slaves. But so my point being is, like, even if a country has a law saying slavery is a no, you get a slap on the wrist. It has only been Christian nations that have actually said, no, we are abolishing slavery, and the penalty for that is life in prison or death. there's never been a Muslim country that's done that. There's never been a Hindu country or any other country that has done that. That is strictly a a Christian principle.
What,
that
they actually seriously punish people for slavery?
Yeah.
I don't think that's true. I'm pretty sure if you go to like any developed country, the penalties for slavery are going to be relatively harsh.
Which developed country are you talking about?
I mean, we could talk about, I don't know, Japan, South Korea.
Japan still has 50,000 slaves according to the Washington Post.
I'm trying to find the source for this map. I saw the picture of the map you sent.
Here, let me send the.
But countries with large populations are probably going to be a lot higher on this list.
Right.
The United States is already on this list pretty high. So is Brazil.
Yeah. No, it is.
So
Absolutely.
Is Poland. I mean, like.
No, but what I'm getting at is the only countries that have ever had a version of the Emancipation Proclamation are the United States and Britain, and then some other Western European countries kind of fell in line with Great Britain and adhered to like the legislation that William Wilberforce passed.
And like also like the the French Revolution abolished slavery too. That definitely wasn't a Christian reaction.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, I mean, I won't argue that it's impossible. I think that there's prevenient grace, all over the place. But, sorry, I'm trying to link you the article here. Here's the article.
Okay.
You might have to sign up though.
No, thankfully, I guess I was able to access it freely. I guess you're given a free number of them per month or something, I think.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, no, so it's screen shared on the screen right now. It seems to me that, with the possible exception of India here, that the vast majority of these countries are basically just poor. Well, I guess Poland and Czech Republic too, or is that Austria?
No, I think that's Poland, Ukraine, and Czech Republic. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's not Ukraine. That's
yeah, it's Czech Republic.
That Belarus.
Balkan states.
Yeah.
Belarus and no, Belarus is lighter, but like most of these countries, with the exception of some of those Eastern European ones, and India, are like extremely impoverished countries without strong rule of law.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you there. I don't think that it's deniable that Christianity played a huge role in the abolishing of slavery in the modern era.
I think that having a universalist doctrine probably does help to some extent. Having this idea that we're all universalists within the faith, I guess, such as Christianity, probably has like some positive role. Sure.
But I mean, that was kind of a long tangent on Christianity and government. But to kind of wrap things back to where we started with what you were asking, every government either is going to be secular or it's going to be based on Sharia law, or it's going to be based off of Hindu principles or Christian principles. And I think that the Christian worldview is vast superior to any other secular, atheist, Hindu, Muslim, any other worldview. And I think that it's the most objective worldview. And so I think that that's why I think I would prefer to live in a Christian nation than any other type of government, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, you already live in a secular country, though.
No, I know. And that's why I'm active in politics, is hopefully that someday that'll change.
Why do you think that I mean, obviously it's your faith, but why do you think that having a Christian government is better than having a secular one? Because I look at a lot of the progress that has happened over the past few hundred years, and it seems like secular, democratic, liberal societies
so I think
the most prosperous ones on earth and freest ones on earth.
So I think that we are prosperous because we were originally our founders, they had a great debate over whether or not to um, base our form of government off of natural law or common law. And so we went with the British, and they have their British common law position. Common law happens to be based off of Mosaic law, the judicial and moral law of the Bible. And so I think that our prosperity is a direct benefit from our Christian foundations, which were not perfect. There were a lot of things that we could have done better. But I think that the prosperity we're experiencing in the Western world today is a direct correlation with the common law, which is Mosaic law principles that we were founded upon.
Yeah, I don't know enough about Mosaic law and common law being connected. I'm not familiar with that. Let's say it's true, for the sake of this argument. But the only reference to religion in our Constitution is to separate it from the state. And I think that our founders wanted to make a secular government. Now they may have.
This is like my really big pet peeve here is the whole separation of church and government. So people have very little understanding of what theology was of our founders. So about 1/3 of our founders were atheists, 1/3 were deists, and 1/3 were Orthodox Christians. So they were Puritans, Quakers, and Presbyterians. So they all had very similar soteriology, and in particular, they had very similar eschatology. They were postmillennials and theonomists, which is really, really important here. Because the separation of church and state, that's a theonomist principle. And it doesn't mean that God is removed from government. In fact, it means that God is in government. Church and the government, the separation there is that they both have separate spheres of influence. So, for instance, the government would never, provide, communion to the people or spiritual guidance to the people. That's the purview, the sphere of influence of the church. The sphere of influence of the federal government, that is to provide and enforce the judicial law of the Old Testament. So, thou shalt not murder, stuff like that. And that is completely outside of the sphere of influence of the church. And so that's what when the founding fathers were talking about separation, that's what they were talking about the distinct responsibilities of government and church, but both institutions needed to glorify God. That's why it's really important to understand the theology of the founding fathers. And the atheists and the deists that were not Christian, they still recognized and affirmed that this was necessary in our government. That's why Thomas Jefferson wrote the Danbury Baptist letters.
Well, I don't actually agree at all. Actually, I think that a lot of the founding fathers, like Jefferson, for instance, I'm not sure if the Danbury Baptist letters was that the one where he specifically said that the America is founded or a republic can only be kept by a Christian people or something along those lines.
No, that's where the phrase separation of church and state actually comes from, is from that letter.
Oh, you mean was it the Virginia statute?
No, the Danbury Baptist letters.
Okay, I'm not familiar with those. History is an area where I need to study and learn.
So the phrase separation of church and state never actually appears in the Constitution. It appears only in the Danbury Baptist letters, and that's where people bring it up. And
and the First Amendment, which prohibits the establishment of any state religion.
The First Amendment protects the ability to practice religion, which is a Christian principle. You can practice whatever religion you want. That does not mean that the government does not adhere to a Christian worldview. And you can look at what all the founding fathers, even the secular ones, wrote about that. They were in complete agreement with that. That's why there's so many quotes like, our Constitution was written wholly for a moral and religious people. Religious back then meaning Christian. Our Constitution written for a Christian people. You can only maintain this republic if you are a Christian people. There's thousands of quotes like that from the founding fathers. But the Danbury Baptist letters, where Thomas Jefferson was talking about the separation of church and state, it was a letter. He received a letter from the Danbury Baptists, and they were concerned that Thomas Jefferson was going to establish the Congregationalist Church as the official church of the federal government. And he wrote to them, no, we need to have a separation between church and state, meaning denomination and state. So he promised the Danbury Baptists that he would not choose the Congregationalist Church nor any church as the official church of the federal government. Now, to show that he still thought that, even though Thomas Jefferson is often thought of as a deist, he still believed Christianity was so important to the government of the United States that he established official church service every single Sunday in the U.S. House of Representatives, and that went on, I think, until the 1840s. So even the deist Thomas Jefferson recognized the importance of having Christianity as the center of our government.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of them back then viewed even the people who didn't believe in religion believed that it had a lot of utility and was useful in some manner or another. But the First Amendment, I pulled it up here to the exact text. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
Yes, correct. That's denominationalism.
Shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. I'm pretty sure that's pretty clear, and it's been interpreted by the Supreme Court as being pretty clear too, that the United States is a secular country.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, the Congress shall not establish a denomination.
That's no, shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, they should not.
You keep saying denomination, like it's broadly Christian, but not a specific group of Christians.
Yes, correct.
But that's not what the law says. It says establishment of religion, not just.
It's not a law. It's the first
broadly, including a non-denominational Christianity.
We'll disagree on that all day. I don't think I'll ever convince you, or you'll ever convince me. I think that the intention of that was that they're not going to create an official denomination, nor are they going to create a separate religion. But I think it's evident that the Christian God is intertwined with our Constitution.
Why didn't they just say that in the law then?
I think they did. I think the language was different back then. I think our understanding of what they meant is different today than it would have been 250 years ago.
Why do you think that that's the case? Why do you think that at the time they were like, well, we want to make this officially a Christian country by law in our Constitution?
Well, it's like that
it in this specific way that people are going to lose the meaning of, including apparently the Supreme Court for the past 250 years. Or almost.
So a modern day example would be like Generation Z lingo. So back when I was in high school, you would say how do you hit on a girl or something like that, and then today you say I think it's riz a girl or something like that, and it amounts to the same thing, right? You're trying to seduce or trying to become attractive to someone else, right? And so, like for instance, when John Adams said our Constitution was written wholly for a moral and religious people, like today we hear religious and we assume that means all religions. Well, I don't think that. I think that given the historical context, the historical hermeneutics of language back then, I think that when he says religious, he specifically means Christian. So I think that the meaning of the words has evolved slightly over the years.
Well, why haven't the courts ever recognized that to be the case, though?
Because our courts are full of sinful humans, just like you and me.
Including in the 19th century?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, humans have been sinning for thousands of years.
Well, it just seems like this. Okay, so as an agnostic, I'm an agnostic atheist, I guess you could say. But as someone who's looking at this, and I'm looking at your interpretation of what you think that they meant by this. It seems like you've drawn a conclusion and you want to reach that conclusion. And throughout history, other people didn't seem to hold this view. It seems like the Supreme Court, the lawmakers, it didn't seem like they held the view that you could establish a religion in the United States, but not establish a specific denomination.
I would say that there have been plenty of Supreme Court rulings that have been terrible. And I think that I have a particularly good understanding of what they meant because I share their theology. I essentially have Puritan theology myself. I'm very old school like that. I think that when you understand someone's moral and religious beliefs, especially when they're a theonomist, I think that it gives you a unique insight into what they were actually talking about.
Right. Like, well. So let's take, for instance, the United States of America, Congress
Okay.
signing the Treaty of Tripoli. Right.
Okay.
This was in 1796. So shortly after the Constitution was passed, and I believe 7 years. And it was in Article 11 of the Treaty of Tripoli is that as the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, as it has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Muslims, and as the said states never entered into any war or active hostility against any Mohammedan nation. It is declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinion shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between the two countries. So why would the Congress of the United States vote to pass the Treaty of Tripoli, including a very clear article in this treaty that says that the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion?
I think that they were lying to establish a peace treaty. I think that they saw that as a necessary evil.
Why wouldn't they just take out the part where it say, hey, look, we're a Christian country, but we have no quarrel with you, or just not even say anything at all about religion and be like, we want peace with you?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. They should have.
So they're just like making these big mistakes early on.
That's the press. That's a core tenet of the Christian faith is that mankind is totally depraved and makes horrible mistakes. I mean, I think our huge our an even bigger mistake was that we allowed slavery in our Constitution, right? It wasn't until 13 amendments later that there's plenty wrong with our Constitution. There's plenty wrong with our early form of government. Like, we did a lot wrong. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue that it was perfect.
Isn't it also possible, though, that they just didn't want to put religion in the Constitution at all, and they thought that, hey, look, we don't want to put this in here, and we're just going to let people practice whatever faith they want, and we're going to just have the government not be in the sphere at all whatsoever?
People bring up Article 11 of the Treaty of Tripoli all the time but that's like the only example where it says like we're not founded on Christianity. Whereas you have quotes from founding fathers saying, yes, we are founded on Christianity. We are one nation under God. That's everywhere throughout our founding documents. So I think it's more likely that the predominant Puritan, Quaker, Presbyterian view of that time period, played a massive role in the founding of our country.
In terms of culturally, sure. I mean, I'm sure. Obviously, religion played a major role in people's lives throughout, and still does, throughout all of human history.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean that we're creating an expressly religious country.
How familiar are you with theonomist eschatology?
Pretty much not at all.
Okay, so postmillennial eschatology or theonomist eschatology, it's people like to call it Christian nationalism today. Every single founding father that was a Christian was a theonomist back then, which means they argue the same as me. Like I'm getting my arguments about dehumanization from the founding fathers. Like they didn't just like think that we should be a Christian nation. Like their goal was to make our Constitution a document that would glorify God. Like that's just part of their theology.
They may have thought. I don't know. They may have thought that it was glorifying God by creating a government that they thought was good, and that government was a secular one.
Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to convince you, which is fine.
Okay.
But
we can move on to a topic.
Yeah, I mean, I got probably another 15 minutes in me if you wanna, if you have a topic that we can fit into that.
Oof. Well, we can make it brief. Yeah, I'm probably gonna go soon too. But
okay.
How much emphasis do you think we should place on Well, let's not say legally, because I think that the originalist reading of the Constitution is a valid one. No, you're not the one I agreed with necessarily. I think there could be multiple valid interpretations or schools of thought on that, but I think it's a valid view that one can hold. But in terms of morally and philosophically, how much do you think that we should place emphasis on the founding fathers versus trying to build our own society now, as it is, and like taking the founding fathers as great figures who were democratic and built our great nation and did a lot of great things and also some bad things, but a lot of really good things, building the greatest country on earth, and or a most successful country on earth, let's say. And
go ahead. Sorry,
oh,
I
sorry,
apologize.
that's a very rambly point. That they built this great country. They were great historical figures. Did some bad things too. That we almost glorify them, especially conservatives in this country, as like we need to like look to the founders for like what we should do, and like we should try and like create a society in their eyes, or how we think that they would want it to be. And there's obviously disagreements about what they thought, and they disagreements amongst themselves about what they believed. But how much should we look to that versus being like, look, we're the humans alive today on Earth. We could look to guidance from these founding fathers, and we can also other sources of wisdom as well, including religious ones. But fundamentally, we're not beholden to whatever vision some human 200 years ago created or wanted to create.
Just to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly, how much emphasis should we give the founding fathers?
Yes,
Is
not
that
legally, but morally and philosophically, in terms of how we should guide our own society and country.
So I don't think we should idolize any man. I think the only person that we should worship is Jesus Christ. I think that it's fine to recognize the good things that people have done. I'm happy to say that George Washington did a lot of great things. I'm also happy to say that he owned slaves, and that was evil. I don't think that there has ever been a good or morally righteous person on the planet. I think that we're all capable of great evil, and I think that the only good things we do, I think that those are a prevenient grace from God, and that unless we have a regenerative experience in our hearts, I don't think that we can have the hope of doing any good. And so I don't believe that we should ever, in short, I don't believe that we should ever idolize the founding fathers. I think that we can look to them, and we can look to like I've been doing. I say I look at their specific doctrinal beliefs and how that plays out in their life to try to get an understanding of what they meant in the Constitution. But I don't think that we should elevate them on a pedestal. That's kind of why like I have no problem with Democrats wanting to take down statues of these people, because I don't think we should be making statues of any people. I think that's a little bit cringe. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, no, it does definitely. Actually, I thought you might have went the other way with that one, but it's definitely coherent within the Christian philosophy. I mean, it makes sense that as a Christian you wouldn't want to idolize any people. I just know that unfortunately, myself included, I used to be pretty conservative, maybe 10 years ago, and like I was like, oh well, the founding fathers like had like this belief, so we have to, we have to sort of like we should take that extremely highly into account and be like, this is like the ideal nation because Thomas Jefferson believed X about an agrarian republic or whatever, right? And we should move towards that because Thomas Jefferson advocated it for it, rather than like taking into account like Thomas Jefferson's arguments as if they were coming from anyone else.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. That's. Yeah. I think I can agree with most of what you said there. I think. I think that most. I would argue that there's very few people alive today that actually. I don't think people have done their homework and read. Read the Harvard educated theologians that played an influence on the founding fathers. I don't think people have read Jonathan Edwards that played an immense role in the the theology behind our founding fathers. I don't think very many people today understand what the founding fathers actually believe, and I say that I don't think most conservatives understand what the founding fathers believed. I think that that particularly in America, Christianity is very messed up. I don't think that it's the historical. I think that there's a lot of really bad doctrine in the United States, and I think that conservatives try to interject what they think about Christianity into the founding fathers, as opposed to looking at what the founding fathers believed about Christianity. Which I can tell you that if you brought another Christian in here today, me and that Christian would probably disagree on 95% of theology, because I hold the same theological beliefs that were prominent in the 17 and 18 and 19 early 1900s. So I don't know if any of that makes sense to you, but
No, I people are definitely, myself included, very unfortunately uneducated about a lot of different aspects of history and society and politics, and I guess part of it's just we don't have enough time to educate everyone on everything in school, and we don't necessarily always focus on what's important. It's funny too, because I think we almost focus too much on the founding fathers actually in school to some extent. I think that maybe it's fine, but I feel like so much of our history is about the early republic, and then it sort of like jumps to slavery and then World War II. We don't actually learn much about the other periods in between, and we also don't really learn much about world history, it seems, and also like not just history, but analyzing history from like multiple different angles, especially like high school level, and trying to understand that it wasn't just like, here's a historical event that happened, but like try to like dive deeply into like different schools of thought on like why this event happened, and also like what the people at the time were thinking and arguing and debating about the specific topic, like understanding the arguments then. I feel like we don't do a great job of that in our schools.
yeah. I mean, you won't get a complaint from me on that one. I think our schools are pretty terrible. So,
well, this was a pretty cordial conversation, which I kind of pretty much expected it to be. What's an area where you like really disagree with the left and wish they would change on?
abortion.
Okay.
I would as much as I despise universal health care right now, if the left agreed to abolish abortion, I would gladly have a universal health care system in this country, even though I hate the concept of universal health care.
Well, those are two other topics that we go like way too long on, probably.
Yeah, probably. But one area that I agree with, classical liberals on, though, is probably like more of a anti-interventionalist stance. But I don't know how many. I don't want to mischaracterize the left. I think that there probably used to be more people that were like pacifists on the left than there are today. I don't know for sure, but I think over the years I've become more of a pacifist politically, and I think that is an area that I think the left has been correct on in the last 30 years.
Oh, it's interesting. I've actually moved like the opposite direction. Like 10 years ago, I was like a big Ron Paul supporter.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a big Ron Paul guy. Like audit the Fed, close all the military bases overseas, get bring everyone home. No, Fortress America, rah rah, free market, everything, right? And then I became much more interventionist over time. But not really. I don't think I'm like super interventionist. But I've been more open to the idea that in some select cases, the use of a foreign policy tool other than isolationism can be useful. Like I think it's probably good that the United States has the ability has bases around the world and can quickly deploy forces anywhere in the world at a moment's notice. I think that's probably a good thing. And having allies in the world, and like broadly having like peace and stability in the world. Like we're in the most peaceful time ever.
It's so funny because I was actually just arguing with a really conservative person yesterday about this. I'm like, he's very, pro, basically where you're at. And I was like getting into such an argument with him about it because like I think that I mean this goes down a whole other rabbit hole. We don't have to discuss it, but like I think that opening strengthening our military bases around the world, I think that's contributing to China escalating their military presence around the world, but that's a whole nother topic.
It is. Do you mind if I ask one question about that? It's not going to jump super deep.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you think and you can answer this however you want, I won't even respond. I just want to hear what you think. But do you think that if the United States closed down its military bases and like just said, hey, look, Japan, it's been great, we're going to phase out our alliance with you, that we would see, and like not just Japan, but let's say Middle East, all of our bases, all of our allies just said, hey, look, it's been fun, we're backing out completely, and we went to more not interventionist approach. So I'm going to say isolationist because we still trade with people, whatever, but not interventionist approach. Do you think that we would live in a more peaceful world or a more dangerous world?
Immediately, a more dangerous world. I think that just pulling out of the world, all in one day, probably would have a lot of unintended consequences.
Or even phased out of like a 20-year period, let's say, or 10-year period.
I think like particularly, like if you look at like the U.S. involvement in the Middle East since the Soviet era, like if you look at the CIA's intervention in Afghanistan in 1978 and our increasing of military bases in the Middle East in the 70s and 80s in response to Russia, I think if we had not done that, if we had not like tried to have a proxy war with Russia in the Middle East, I don't think that 9/11 would have happened. I don't think that Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan and some of the Pakistanis would have had such a big problem with the Western society.
Okay, well, hey, thanks for your answer, and that could be a whole conversation we can have some other time too if you want. I'd be interested.
Yeah, for sure.
And,
yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to be respectful of your time. You got anything else from me?
No, just I think this is going to upload on my channel too. Just send me whatever links you want to have, just so I can put them in the description when I get to it later tonight or tomorrow, and anything that you want me to plug in there.
Yeah, people can find me at Tachyon Blue on YouTube, Kick, Twitch, Facebook. So yeah, I don't really have any links specifically. I don't think I cited any like studies or anything, so you don't have to worry about that.
Okay, yeah, I'll put your Twitter link in there though, and your YouTube link and Kick if I can find it. So
yeah, I've got yours in my description as well.
Cool, perfect. Yeah, maybe if you want to do a gaming stream sometime too, if we want to play something, we could do that too. That might be fun someday. So
yeah, just let me know. And
yeah, for sure.
I'm not super interested in like gaming too much on the channel, except for like as a background thing maybe. So
right
I'm
on.
not sure I'm gonna do too much gaming stuff. But if you want to talk like politics, or I don't know if I want to do a religious debate. It's not a topic I feel comfortable enough to speak on it educatedly, and I don't have the interest enough to like do a ton of research on.
Yeah, for sure.
Religion, and it's been like that's because that's a never-ending topic to research. It's.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's difficult because there's so much bad doctrine in the church today that you have to study up on, not just good doctrine but bad doctrine as well. So
yeah, so but if maybe religion sometime, but we can talk politics again, or even just like a friendly conversation where if you wanted to get like interviewed about your faith, but not like a debate where you'd have to like defend your faith necessarily.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just DM me, and we'll figure something out in the coming month or two.
Cool. And if I'm ever live, and I'm not like super busy with something else on stream, you have access in my Discord too to jump in anytime.
Cool, perfect. All right, same. Same. If you ever see me streaming and want to hop in and talk, let me know.
Cool. All right. Well, hey man, it's been fun. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Oh, do you want to plug real quick one last time? Where do people can find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Andy_P_1989.
Cool. All right. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.